Yo, thanks for checking out the Affecting Our Altruism podcast. This show brings you the voices of people who are doing incredible work to affect positive change in the world. We explore our unique relationships with the principles and community of effective altruism. Some have identified with it, some don't really, yet all of us care deeply about making the world a better place. We recorded this special episode in person at the EA Canada retreat following EAGX Toronto 2024. James Rayton, head of community at Giving What We Can, spent the last 4 years working and living in Somalia, Burundi, Rwanda, and Kenya for Save the Children and the United Nations. James knows more than many the scale of the challenge the world faces in global health, security, and development. It's because of this that he signed the 10% Giving Pledge and why he's now so delighted to be Giving What We Can's head of community. James is incredibly passionate about effective giving and growing the community of people who share this philosophy. In our episode today, James speaks about his journey into effective giving, his visions for growing the effective giving community, and some valuable insights from years of direct work in the field. I drop a love bomb towards the end and publicly make the 10% pledge for my own self. We're grateful that James took the time out of his day to join us today. Have a listen. Well, James, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I've been learning more about EA, and one of the things I was excited about was this podcast. So it's nice to kind of be on it. It's nice, and it's the first time I've ever done a podcast before. So.
Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
May it not be the last. We're shooting live from the Center for Social Innovation in Toronto, in Spadina neighborhood. It's a really cool part of the town. There's Kensington Market nearby, and all around us are people bustling and hustling. There's even a Dalmatian doing some dog work.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I missed that.
Yeah, the Dalmatian behind you. There's literally a Dalmatian hanging out. This is a place where ideas turn into reality. There's some EA orgs that are housed in this space, and we do some Toronto EAs do co-working. So we're kind of in a really special space, and joined by a very special guest. This is James Rayton. And James works with Giving What We Can, an incredible organization that helps people make a habit of effective giving. I heard James speak this weekend at EAGX Toronto, and James agreed to be on this show today. So today I wanted to hear a little bit about your experience at the conference, and also a bit more about you, your background, your pre-EA life.
Yeah.
If there's a real thing such as pre-EA life.
Yeah.
If there's life before EA.
It's in you. I think it's always in you, right? And you just kind of discover it. But
yeah. So how was the conference for you?
It was amazing. So I'm new to the role, but I'm also I've been giving effectively for 4 years. I've been aware of effective altruism for 14 maybe. Mm-hmm. But it's my first ever time going to an EAG, and it was awesome. It was a really kind of uplifting experience, and also kind of quite enlightening as well, meeting all of these people, very smart, motivated people talking about all of the topics kind of associated with EA and beyond, actually. Some really just exciting and enlivening conversations about other things as well. Like I learned about the FIRE movement, which I'd never been aware of before, which was just very cool. And I loved it. I'm here for work, obviously, but also on a personal level, I really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's going to be a huge perk of my role at Giving What We Can come into these events.
What was it like speaking to a crowd that you were sort of unfamiliar with?
Yeah. So I was talking about effective giving, and at Giving What We Can, we talk about this idea of a funnel. So you have people who are kind of unaware of EA or effective giving. You then hopefully encourage them to be aware, and then aligned. So I know what it is. I think it's a good idea. You then talk about actually acting on that, so making a donation to effective organizations, or even signing a pledge. And I'd been there at that pledge signing area for sort of 4 or 5 years, but I'd never gone to the step below, which was advocacy, and actively kind of promoting this idea of effective giving. And I'd done that with my friends and I'd done it with family for a while, but this is the first time I'd kind of stood on a stage in front of people and kind of spoken about my passion for effective giving. And it was really amazing. And a couple of people came up to me and they've said that it was a factor in them deciding to sign a 10% pledge. And that, it was super emotional. I nearly cried actually when they were saying that. It's like, oh my gosh, what a cool thing to do. So yeah, it was a really special, very kind of awesome experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're there when people are making a change in their life,
Yeah.
witnessing them walk their feelings. What is effective giving?
Sure. So effective giving is the idea. Well, maybe I can phrase this through Giving What We Can's vision statement, which is to create a world where giving effectively and significantly is a cultural norm. And there's sort of three aspects of that, right? So effectively is encouraging people to give to effective causes, effective charities. So looking at the average charity's impact, if you go from there to the most impactful, it's often up to 100 times or more impact from that kind of normal good charity through to the best. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to encourage people to give their donations, their pounds, dollars, whatever else it might be, to the most impactful, effective ones. Mm-hmm. The second part is significantly. So encouraging people to give a sizable percentage of their income to those effective causes. So we champion the 10% pledge, which is 10% of your income over the course of your working life to go to effective causes. And then finally is this idea of a cultural norm, and that is where giving significantly and effectively becomes something that is the norm across, at least across the global north. And we're not talking about kind of marginal change here. We're talking about societal, cultural shifts towards this kind of giving. So that's what we mean when we talk about effective giving. Basically, is those kind of three key tenets.
I see. And so encouraging people to give to charities, nonprofits, causes where the effect is measurable, is documentable, and is kind of factually happening.
Yeah, that is exactly it. And actually that leads me on to the other thing that Giving What We Can does, which is to evaluate charity evaluators. So we kind of like audit the people like the organizations like GiveWell, for example, who are doing this charity evaluation. We evaluate them. So we kind of keep them honest, basically, and, look at their methodologies and their ways of doing things to make sure that they are hitting kind of very high standards. And then from that, we are able to make our own recommendations to donors and to pledges about what we think are the best causes and the best organizations to give to.
So it's not just a place to Giving What We Can does isn't just to grow the number of people who are giving effectively, but also to make sure that those donations are going to are being checked by the checkers. Watching the watchmen, we're watching the watchmen.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and we're a small team, so that's where we think we can have the most kind of marginal benefit for within effective altruism. But yeah, and our website has all of this information about the charities that we recommend and why, and breakdowns of the different cause areas, along with a whole boatload of other kind of really cool information and stuff. So
yeah. And so you've been giving effectively for 4 years.
Yeah.
How did you start?
Sure. So it goes back a while. So I was at university when a guy called Toby Ord, he's a philosopher. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of him. He was kind of starting this movement. He was an academic at the university I was at. And I went to one of his talks and was pretty convinced. And I started giving a larger portion of my income from then. I was just at university at the time, so it wasn't very much. But then I kind of created a habit around giving effectively. I was really bought into this idea that we should give to the most impactful causes. And I was also, previous to that, very passionate about international development and humanitarian response, which is where my kind of career took me after graduating until now. So yeah, I've been doing it already, but I kind of formalized that to myself and made this commitment for my whole career back in 2020. Yeah.
2020. A lot of people made changes around then.
Yeah. It's funny. I decided in sort of 2019 that I was going to do. We have something called a trial pledge, which is where you pick the percentage and you pick for how long you want to do it. So I said I'm going to try 5% and do it for 6 months. And actually that worked really well for me, and I felt I could give a little bit more. So then I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to make this bigger commitment of 10% for the rest of my kind of working life. But I was living in Kenya at the time, and COVID had just kind of struck, and I was working for a big NGO in Kenya at the time, and I was just seeing the impact on people's lives. Not necessarily of COVID, almost like the side effects, because so much donor funding and like media attention was going to COVID that all of these ongoing challenges of poverty were just being completely ignored. And like children weren't going to school. There was no remote learning in Kenya, right? Or very little. Malaria was being ignored. HIV was being completely ignored. So for us, it was like this secondary crisis of how are we going to deal with that, and that also kind of sharpened my mind to being like, I have this income, I live a pretty comfortable life. I've been very lucky to have the education and to have the opportunities that I've had, and then being face to face with this, unbelievable suffering, I was just like, okay, I feel like I've got to do something about this on a personal level, as well as my work at the time.
So the do something was to increase your donations.
Yeah, and to make the 10% pledge, to make that commitment. Yeah. Like, okay, I do really kind of viscerally, emotionally believe in this. Yeah. And so, that's kind of why it's one of the reasons why I kind of was like, I want to solidify this and make this something more kind of permanent in my life.
Yeah. It sounds like you had an opportunity to really confront your values, and you had and then do something about it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people face crises and just do something.
Yeah.
That is like some kind of self-care, or it's some kind of like regression towards a past where they go into dark places. It sounds like you found a way to really put your actions to work.
You know what? I think like your point there and the words self-care are really interesting, because part of my motivation for doing this was because I was feeling bad about it. I was feeling guilty. I was feeling like I wasn't doing enough. And so at a base level, I like really hate this idea of inequality and suffering. And so that was my motivation. But also because of that, I was then feeling, guilty and bad about it. So by giving, I was also able to kind of reduce those feelings. This whole thing about like, is there any truly altruistic act? Maybe not. And maybe part of it was just doing it to make myself feel a bit better. But that is also true. Like I am now hugely proud of my giving, and it is one of the best and most defining parts of who I am. So yeah, it's that self-care thing is I think really important.
I think what like the kind of crisis that some people take up smoking. You know what I mean? Like some people they deal with it that way. Some people take up running, or swimming. Like you took up swimming. You didn't start smoking. You didn't do like the self-serving negative thing.
Yeah.
You did the thing that's like, oh well, let me look at the results. Let me look at effectiveness. And really like, I wish there was a way for crises to direct people towards like useful action instead of like coping mechanisms.
It's funny again, like they're taking up smoking thing. Like so many frontline aid workers, you'll find that they're super stoic, kind of like hardcore, hard, unemotional people. And you ask them why, and they're basically like, I can't do this job for 20 years. Like I can't be working in Gaza or Yemen or Burundi or wherever else it might be. Even local staff, they're just like, I can't, it is painful to do this. And so some of them kind of like shut down. Like I'm sure the rate of alcoholism in the aid sector is way above the average, and whatever else it might be. I just think it's a coping mechanism because when you're put face to face with some of the challenges that the aid sector and the humanitarian response sector, whatever else, is dealing with, I can completely see why you would just be like, I can't deal with this. Emotionally, I can't deal with this.
Now, set the stage for me a little bit more. You were in Kenya at the time?
Yeah, sure.
So should I say Kenya or Kenya?
Kenya.
Kenya, with an E.
Yeah.
Kenya.
Yeah. Gosh, so yeah, I was working for this NGO. I was working for Save the Children, and I moved to Kenya, and I was basically doing our impact investment work. So we were investing in child-focused businesses, so giving them loans, giving them basically like very favourable access to equity, so that they could then grow their operations.
Is it the Mohammed Yunus type stuff, like microloans?
Yeah, kind of like microloans, but and like low or no interest loans for businesses that were focusing on children. So I started doing that, and we were like doing assessments. I was visiting refugee camps a lot to go and meet the businesses, and it was a really cool thing, and a completely new way for Save the Children to operate, more sustainable. We were attracting new kinds of finance, but for me also it was a really great opportunity to like go and meet people and go and see what their innovative solutions were for some of the challenges we were dealing with. So yeah, I had 3 years living in Kenya, but I was working maybe 1 or 2 weeks per month. I was in Burundi, which is the poorest country in the world, and also in
poorest.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a really tough,
unenviable crown.
Yeah. So I did that again, really rewarding work, good work, and then most recently I was the UN's crisis response manager for Somalia. So Somalia, one of the most kind of complex, difficult contexts in the world. You've got clan dynamics, religious dynamics. There's an Al-Shabaab insurgency, huge kind of gender inequality. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and my job was to manage our crisis response centre. So basically, my main job while I was there was dealing with flooding. So we had huge flooding in Somalia.
On top of all that.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, again, very rewarding, but also incredibly draining and challenging work. And also, if I can just say, like another reason why I'm so kind of proud to be working for Giving What We Can is I saw firsthand how inefficient and ineffective some of these big bureaucratic UN ways of working are. And honestly, going from that to Giving What We Can, where we're really promoting efficiency and everything else, has been a complete breath of fresh air.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a bit of context. The last kind of 5 years, I suppose.
Wow. So you really have like an experience to draw upon, and like to see what effects occur in nonprofit. And can you say that UN is a nonprofit? What even is it?
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know. It's like this supranational body. Yeah,
sort of government.
And actually, to be honest, I think that's one of the challenges that the UN faces, is that they don't have this scrutiny that maybe NGOs do, or even national aid budgets do, and so they don't have that kind of efficiency motive that other organisations do. But look, I don't want to badmouth them. They were doing good work. I think what I'm now realising is that kind of good isn't good enough, and particularly for my own donations. I don't want to give to an organisation that is doing, good work. I want to give to the best, and that's why I'm so passionate about Giving What We Can and effective altruism more generally, because the difference you can have by donating to the most impactful causes and the most impactful organizations is just mind-blowing.
James, did you see this guy who posted, I think his name is Anthony, an African Ugandan farmer who recently posted an EA form, created some stir. And he's saying like, y'all, EAs, all y'all, so I'm from Texas, he doesn't sound like it. He doesn't sound like a guy from Dallas. Everybody, effective altruists, I don't see any of your work happening in my neighborhood. I am in he says the poorest place is the poorest part is the
Sure.
poorest town, and and there's a really fascinating conversation there where like the target audience of people wanting to do the most good is like, hey guys, I'm like over here.
Yeah.
Where's the aid at?
Yeah.
I worry continuously about this type of situation.
Yeah.
And do you see the aid being distributed to people like from famous EA orgs, such as like, have you ever seen the implementation of the operation?
Yeah. I have seen that work, and I do believe in that work. And the organisation, the charities that give well and Giving What We Can and other kind of charity evaluators recommend are often having super impactful work in these areas. If you take the AMS, or the Against Malaria Foundation, like they are having huge impacts on the reduction in malaria by distributing malaria nets to people who can't afford them. And malaria nets are cheap, right? Like Canadian dollars, it's around $7 for a malaria net. But these communities can't afford them. That's a huge luxury if you're living on less than a Canadian dollar and a half a day or whatever else it might be. So by receiving one of those nets, if you distribute enough of those nets, it's fairly likely that you're able to prevent someone from dying from malaria. And they think it's around sort of 7,500 Canadian dollars to prevent a death. I do think they're having a really credible impact. Give Directly is another great organisation, giving cash grants to these communities and saying, we trust you. We believe that you're going to use this money to have a meaningful impact in your life, which is just an awesome thing.
Could you indulge me a little bit on the AMF claim?
Sure.
So that certain number of dollars prevents a malaria death.
Yeah.
What though life is lived by these people, these children? Is it a life in this? Is in the same squat like poverty, the same deep poverty, right? And so it's a maybe average life expectancy increase of a certain number of years.
Yeah, I often think of it in terms of this bell curve, right? So you've got global north, people living in the global north. If you've got a kind of average wage, then you're very likely to be in the top 5% of earners, maybe probably the top 2%, even 1% of earners. If you then look at the other side of the bell curve, what's that like if you're in the bottom 2% of global earners, and life is miserable? It can be miserable, right? Like people find a way to survive and people find a way to be happy, but like the challenges they are facing are really significant often. More than just below 10%, just below 10% of people don't have access to regular clean water. A quarter of children around the world are stunted, which is where you are facing issues with malnutrition, and that means that you can't grow physically and your brains can't grow sufficiently, and the impacts of that are permanent. So you have a permanently lower IQ because of malnutrition. That's not fair. That's not how the world should be. I get quite emotional talking about it, but that to me feels so wrong. And we at this side of the bell curve have I feel a responsibility to do something about that, and to try and help these people if we can.
And people feel you on that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. I'm very kind of conscious that I don't want to lump millions of people into the same boat, right? Like, I would often kind of go to refugee camps and actually just have a really nice time because people were so lovely and like have so hospitable and actually like have quite a nice experience. But it was also just really humbling that you can have that kind of life while you're facing these kind of challenges, and it's quite overwhelming. And I think for me at least, that's why I do feel so passionate about this, because I've been in a position where I've got to kind of witness it and meet people who are facing those challenges, and that's quite. I feel like that's something that I carry with me, and I wish more people could kind of carry that down as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that to the community. That I think a lot of people in the global north don't come in with experiences, face-to-face experiences with dire poverty that inform their choices, and that's really valuable confrontation to have experienced.
Yeah,
and appreciate that. There's something about my question earlier where I asked, okay, so if we prevent a death from occurring from malaria, that life is still lived in a kind of deep poverty, and that's still not good enough for anybody. For them,
it's not. It's not.
For these people. What do you make of this? Like, there's this. I'm exploring this. How do I relate to randomista type stuff? How do I relate to hyper-specific charity, which is demonstrated to be work, versus this like I'm not okay with this. It's just not okay that this is happening.
Yeah.
The 10% pledge is almost like absurd. Like as high as it is compared to the average donor.
Yeah.
I learned this weekend that it's 2% is the average donor in America.
In the US, yeah.
I just think like, how can poverty exist? How can we let this happen?
Yeah.
We're living in a state of moral catastrophe.
Yeah.
While people are donating money to the pet shelter. The pet shelter. The pet, like pets.
Yeah.
Excuse me, companion animals. We're in the animal advocacy space. So, I'm really outraged by it and by the way the world is. It's just not like, so I feel like a 10% pledge is just not even close to enough. Or what do you think about it? What do you think of the broader fact that we have extreme poverty? Do you feel that like eventually it'll be okay soon? That we're on?
We are on a positive trend. I mean, well, as a percentage of population. So let's take sub-Saharan Africa as at a kind of continental level. The percentage of people living in poverty is actually going down, which is obviously a really wonderful thing. Because population growth is so high, the absolute numbers of people living in extreme poverty is actually increasing. So it is a massively challenging issue, and I guess for me, at a sort of philosophical level, I found Peter Singer to be really good on this. He kind of talks about just because it's not happening in front of you doesn't mean it's not happening. Which is so like, and in philosophy also kind of like the doctrine of I think it's like the doctrine of familial relations or something. So like you would do more for your family, which is intuitively the right thing to do than you would for a stranger on the street, and maybe you might do something for the person that you know than you would do for a stranger, and blah, blah, blah. And if you take that to its kind of logical extreme within humanity, that's why people give to the companion animal, because they know it. They see it every single day. You're not seeing some kind of windswept hillside in Burundi where they've erected a kind of temporary shelter. Like, you're not seeing that. That's not in your face all the time in the same way that like homelessness is or whatever else. But I completely buy what Peter Singer's saying, which is, just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean it's not happening. And actually, it's way worse. It's way worse than the challenges that we're facing in the global north.
It's so bad. There's that, and then like that experience of like distance affecting people's behavior is, I think, extreme in the case of farmed animals. Thinking about like ag-gag laws, and there's some recent wins in Ontario, but ag-gag laws prevent people from learning how bad it is in factory farms.
I didn't know that. That's awful. That's shocking.
It's like laws in the books around the developed world for sure. Elsewhere, I don't know, that say make it illegal to publish journalism, to publish photographs and video evidence of the stuff that happens in factory. So that's fed by this human nature that if we don't feel it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's terrible. That's shocking.
And we can take that further out. Like if we want to go a little galaxy brain, like global health and development, poverty, this is classic effective altruism in my perception. Like,
Yeah.
and then farmed animal agriculture and the atrocities occurring in factories right now. That's also a classic issue because, well, we expand our moral circle, we get beyond the species layer.
Yeah.
And then further along, there's less familiar animals like crustaceans and black soldier flies even.
Yeah.
Because we don't see them, we don't think about them.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're not experiencing pain and pleasure.
Or even if you kind of take that further, you start getting into this long-termism argument about kind of the most disenfranchised group are those who haven't been born yet, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've got no idea about that. Like, and how can we think about how to kind of prioritize their interests and their...
Long-termism breaks my brain.
Yeah.
So bad.
But it's interesting. I've never actually thought about it in terms of that spectrum of like, okay, on one side, you've got the kind of pet shelter, homeless people, you're seeing them more regularly. Then you've got kind of, global issues with global health where you might see it on the news occasionally, through to like not being allowed to find out about factory farming and the abuses happening there. And then on the kind of far extreme on the other side, you've got like the future and what is that going to be like and how can we support those, beings. It's an interesting framework, actually.
It's an urgent philosophy.
Yeah.
That's what's so sexy about effective altruism, in my point of view, is it's like these are philosophical problems that we kind of have to figure out. AI is a very abstract things. Like what is suffering? Like what is being like with the AI overlords? Can I be suffer as a result of being like super convenient, have a convenient life where like all my needs are met, but I'm like, so I mean, this is fun stuff.
Yeah, it's cool.
At an EA conference, you get to talk to people.
I was exactly going to say this. This is a plug. If you're enjoying listening to this conversation, which I don't know, hopefully you are, but like this is the kind of conversation you can have at these events, and it's just with people who have done this thinking and like really just have these mind-blowing ideas. And I've loved this weekend having conversations like this, it kind of supports you and it makes you feel that you're doing something meaningful. Even just engaging in the topic is a really good thing to do.
Once you start thinking about it, it can get into your head. I guess quick plug, there's
there's going to be another one in Bengaluru and then Singapore virtual and Australasia, all before the end of the year.
And then the year starts over.
And we start again,
which one, do you have any ones that you're on your schedule?
I am going to Berlin, Boston, and going to India.
Sick.
Sick. It's a big, like a huge my job. No, I haven't. Although I've been having discussions with potential Giving What We Can group leaders in Lagos. So it could be that kind of Giving What We Can is expanding and kind of having opportunities for meetups and stuff in Nigeria, which I think would be awesome.
That excites me a lot.
Yeah.
The fact that Africa, any part of Africa, frankly, is getting some play in the EA's community.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, and I guess this is why I'm cautious talking about some of my experiences in East Africa, at least, that I don't want to have this brush against the whole region. Like, there is a huge amount of inequality there as well. Like, there are very rich Kenyans and Tanzanians and whatever else it might be. So there is that as well, and potentially there's effective givers in these regions as well. So why not talk to them?
Yeah. Well, hope to hear from you again and see what you learn in the coming months.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm learning so much. I'm learning so much about the movement and these incredible people. It's very cool.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've learned from talking to people who are on the fence about giving or making a commitment to donating, and what are some things that you found help people think through and probably move towards a decision to sign the 10% pledge?
Yeah, I think maybe this is more kind of niche for the 10% pledge. So a lot of people are kind of just testing this idea, and there's some kind of misconceptions about it. So one, it is not a legal contract. We're not going to kind of come after you if you don't, do that that 10% giving. Second of all, it's over a whole kind of lifetime of you working. So if you have a couple of years where things become more financially difficult and you can't meet that 10%, then that's fine. We just kind of hope that you would then make up for that at a later stage in your life. So, maybe if you're just a student or whatever else, we encourage people to kind of give 1% while they're a student, and then when they start earning to go to 10%. So that, I think, is another thing. Those are a couple of kind of concerns that came up at the conference that I really want to communicate, that kind of are almost like pseudo barriers to signing the 10% pledge. So that was a couple. I think more generally something I'm thinking about is how can we be emotive in our messaging and talk about the emotions of giving, because EA is a very kind of rational movement, and that is a really good thing. I almost think it's like a foundation of EA, but that shouldn't, I think, be to the exclusion of talking about how that feels and the emotion of the causes that we're working with. Like animal suffering should be an emotive thing, and we should kind of talk about that as well. And I think that will attract different audiences into EA, which is a really good thing as well.
Yeah, it's got to be the right feed. Like they feed each other. The emotions, the logos, and the ethos and the pathos. Totally. They've got to feed into each other.
Yeah.
And that's how we operate. We sometimes I'm heady. I can't use my heart. Sometimes I'm numb to my feelings.
Yeah.
Especially as a guy. Like.
Yeah.
Okay, show me the stats.
Yeah.
Which one works better? I'll pick the higher number.
Yeah. I think, as I said, I think that's kind of crucial to EA, and what we're trying to do to focus, at least from a giving perspective, on the most impactful, and that does require a rational approach. But I think on top of that, why not layer some emotions as well, and kind of say, like, and this is why we're passionate about it, and this is why this is my cause area, and be more kind of open about that. And I would hope that would attract different people into this world, because it's as I say, we're trying to create a cultural norm around effective giving, and I think that means we need to communicate in a way that resonates with people.
So here's where I get into your baseball scores. So for your personal donation portfolio, are you constantly like updating it, like fantasy football? Yeah. Like, this person, this impact report from Malaria Consortium was really good this year. I'm going to allocate 3% more.
Maybe I'm not quite. Maybe not quite that much. So before I sort of really focused on giving super effectively, so we're talking like 2015 here, so I was still kind of exploring around my giving. My focus was around basically overpopulation. So I had this theory that a lot of challenges come from basically there being too many humans on the planet. So I kind of focused on that. So I was looking at things like...
Ooh, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe this is morally interesting in itself.
Very interesting. I have a question for you.
Yeah, I was then focusing on access to contraceptions. I was also focusing on women's education. So at least again in sub-Saharan Africa, so my experience and my kind of focus previously was women who have access to education and are able to complete education, have fewer children. So for me, there was like multiple benefits to that kind of donation in terms of gender equality, but also in terms of reducing the population in a kind of morally acceptable way.
Right. So quick question. Just a side note: is EA eugenicist? Just a side question. By the way,
that's a great question. No, I don't think it is.
It wasn't supposed to be a question.
And that's why. An easy one. Yeah. It isn't. And at least in my giving, it's about, I suppose, preventing births from happening. Yeah. And definitely unwanted births, if that makes sense. Like women shouldn't be forced into having children if they don't want to have children.
Yeah.
Right? And that is, a fundamental. So that was the kind of beginning of my giving, and I was focused on basically women's education and an education around access to contraception. So
drop some words.
PSI, Population Services International.
Okay.
I'd also, they were previously called Mary Stropes. What else?
There was a one that recently shut down.
Campaign for Female Education as well. Doing some work with them. But since then, since I signed the pledge and started really looking on Giving What We Can's website and looking into the research, I have shifted more towards a global health focus. So at the moment, I go with Giving What We Can's recommendations and GiveWell's recommendations around a portfolio focused on global health. So I don't broad focus.
Yeah, no, set it, forget it for me.
Yeah, that's just because, like, you know, at least I know from our research team, these guys are really good and they are super focused and they're doing this work so that I don't have to, basically, like outsourcing that.
It's really valuable work being done and Giving What We Can.
We publish all of our evaluations of evaluators on our site, so you can take a look and we kind of go through that reasoning.
That's cool. That's something I learned this weekend.
Yeah,
that actually is a kind of another layer of oversight.
Yeah. So I've recently shifted my kind of portfolio from being 100% global health to being 2/3 global health, and I've got 1/3 kind of meta. Ooh. So I actually give back to Giving What We Can.
Oh, wow.
We did an impact assessment in 2022, which shows that we think we probably have a 30x multiplier. So for each dollar you donate to Giving What We can then hopefully generate $30 that go to effective causes. Just because of the nature of our work promoting effective giving.
That's fun.
Which is cool.
There's a delight to that. Like if you have $1, the very most amazing thing you could do with it is like so about making these dollars work harder.
Yeah.
And then you could just buy a cookie crisp.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing with the same piece of paper.
Yeah.
Or coin in Canada. It's a coin.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's cool.
The world we live in.
Yeah. As I said, there's some caveats to that. Like that's an estimate. It could be lower than that, and also this was an assessment we did back in 2022, looking retrospectively. So it may have changed, but again, we have our impact assessment on our website. You can go and take a look.
And it's so much more utility than I'll get from a cookie crisp. Like,
so much
it's
more.
guaranteed to be higher.
Yeah.
Oh man, you could do better than that.
Yeah. You give $30 or $1 to Giving What We Can, or $30 to one of these organisations, whatever else it might be. Like that, at least for me, makes me way happier than I would be like buying a bigger TV. Right? It's definitely. I guess the challenge I have is drawing a line somewhere. Like where do you stop? What's enough? That, at least for me, is the kind of challenge that I grapple with. How much of a kind of sacrifice do I want to make in my life, and do I start feeling guilty for every other pound that I do buy a cookie cream or whatever else? That can be quite hard, I think. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of effective givers have is where do I draw the line? When you really engage with the philosophy of it.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I kind of feel like signing the pledge and then automatically have it designated through my whatever income, my salary, is probably the easiest way for me to not overthink it. Do you feel similar?
No, completely. Actually, we had a really great bit. We've just Ali Abdal, this famous YouTuber, has just done a video, and he said something which really kind of resonated with me, which is that he'd spent so long agonizing about what level of pledge to sign. Mm-hmm. So, he was saying like 10%, but maybe I should be giving more, or actually, maybe I should be doing, a different kind of pledge or whatever else it might be. And he said that all of that time he was agonizing, he didn't do anything. So he didn't sign any pledge. So, and it was just like, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd just done like, what is it, the minimal that I'm comfortable with? Sign that, do that, make that commitment, make that kind of public oath. Start donating at that level, and then if I want to do more, I can do more, and go from there.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people who are thinking about giving, kind of dip your toe in the water, see how it feels, and that's another reason why we have the trial pledge. If you want to do 1% and just see how that feels for 6 months, sign up a trial pledge, do it.
Yeah.
And then and then go from there.
Yeah. Well, I've given the one for the World Pledge, and I was thinking this weekend to upgrade to the 10%. I haven't done it.
Oh,
Is it?
this could be a huge moment on your podcast.
That I do it? Yeah, just publicly doing it. So yeah, I feel ready.
Okay.
I feel ready.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Hey.
I don't know if I had to like record
I kind
a
of
podcast.
we should have a hug. Should we?
Is there like a gong you got?
We do. We're trying not to kind of pressure people to do this, but yeah, let's tap this.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, let's go.
Hey.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't need that. I can share that.
That's amazing.
For sure.
Oh man, thank you so much. That's a really amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
I pledged it.
Yeah, I kind of feel emotional now. I feel
I'm
really
pledging.
emotional now. Again, yeah.
I'm pledging.
That's really awesome.
You did
what a
it.
cool thing to do.
Hope my wife is okay with that.
You should speak to your partner before you make that commitment.
Okay. No, I can't.
Okay, good. I don't want to be encouraging that to people, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right,
That's
James.
really awesome.
Thanks, James. Thanks for advocating, becoming an advocate.
Yeah.
You're making a difference.
Thank you. So are you. I'm a huge difference by doing that. So thank you.
Right. Well, today our guest has been James Brayton. Giving What We Can, amazing person. Please keep an eye on what Giving What We Can are doing for the coming years as the movement grows to beyond 10,000 pledgers, maybe 100,000 pledgers. Let's see the million pledger come up in the coming years. Yeah? Let's do this together.
Thank you. Thanks.
That's it.
Oh man, let's have another hug. That was I wasn't expecting that. How nice.
I was. So I want you to not go through what I just went through for the last few years between the day I said to myself, "You're right, Dr. Peter Singer. I really should get my boots wet, my fancy boots wet, and sign that 10% pledge," and actually making the public commitment to practice genuine charity. Upon reflection, no significant arguments have made themselves known to me since then. I've just lacked follow through. So to show you how straightforward it is, I want to show you how easy Giving What We Can has made it to take the 10% pledge. You go to this website, givingwhatwecan.org, and click on pledge. Boom. Take the pledge, and you select from these options. If you're employed, student, retired, or unemployed. If you are employed or retired, you base it on your income. If you're a student or unemployed, you base it upon how much money you spend to sustain your individual life, your family's life. Let's say there. And if you're not ready to do the full 10% pledge, you can do a trial pledge if you want for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of months or years. Or if you're ready to do a 10% pledge, right there is 10% is the minimum. That's why they call it the 10% pledge. And you can also, if you have some wealth that you can start donating from, and or the resource you can donate from, you can use that. You enter your country, which currency, imagine how much you make, income, let's say 50,000, for example, enter your birth date. You have to be a certain age, let's say 2000, let's say, for example. Start today. You can create an account. It's probably a good idea so you can get in touch with the community more easily. You can also simply drop an email here and then read this. This is the pledge itself. I recognize that I can use part of my actions, part of my income to do a significant amount of good. Since I can live well enough on a smaller income, I pledge that from October 11th, 2024, and for the rest of my life, or until the day I retire, I shall give at least 10% of what I earn to whichever organizations can most effectively use it to improve the lives of others. I make this pledge freely, openly, and sincerely. That's it. Simple. Then you can say a few words publicly about why you did it, Of course, that's why you did it. You drop in your name. And then click on that. And then boom, this little pink button is it. And that's how you take the 10% pledge. Now, you could do all that. Or you could just not. You can just make a commitment between yourself and the Flying Spaghetti Monster and and just say to yourself or to a different group of people that you are going to commit. There's nobody's telling you what you should do, and it's not legally binding anyway. It's just a community thing, and it's a personal pledge. But I think it's a good idea to use this website, and leverage the Giving What We Can community, and specifically because Giving What We Can does a lot of work to vet which organizations are currently doing some of the best work out there, and they give you a lot of options based upon what matters to you. They use really high standards to vet organizations and assess the assessors, as you might have heard in the interview just now. And this is the conversation around effective altruism. It's like finding the best opportunities to help others that are out there, and Giving What We Can play an important role in this ecosystem. IMHO. Now, this is where the action really happens. Now, on a personal note, having done this, I feel like I can use the 90% that I do still allocate to me and my family with more commitment. I have faith that up until now, it's not really been like I haven't been able to commit as much to myself, because I know, like, what if I could do more for others? This helps me create a little clarity around like my contribution to the world. It helps me at an emotional level, and it helps me feel like I can really just enjoy what I do have and what I can do for myself. And and personally, I'm going to do a lump sum, I think, at the end of this year, in one big check to one or more organizations that I find are some of the most effective ones out there. Once I know how much I've got to share, and at that point, it'll be real, and I can really feel like things are going to be a bit more okay in the world, and because of me, rather because of this choice that I've made, and I don't doubt it's going to feel that good. It's going to feel good, and it's a relief. So, listener, viewer, be picky. Be picky about where you direct your energy, in the form of money or in the form of energy, life, work. It's your choice. It's your free will. But be picky. Don't waste it. Don't get stuck in rumination. Commit, and good luck. I still feel the excitement and inspiration that was in the room after the EAGX Toronto weekend and the retreat afterwards. Meeting up with people in person, committed to using reason and evidence to do the most they could for others, it gave me this feeling of rowing in the same direction, like diverse as a community may be. If you're interested in being a part of an effective altruism conference, there's a lot coming up around the world this year. India's got one in Bengaluru, October 19th through 20th. There's a main stage in Boston, November 1 through 3. I'll be there. Hit me up if you want to talk about something. If you want to be on a podcast episode, I should have time for a couple of recordings. EAGX Virtual takes place 15 through 17 November. Like, who can miss that? It's on the internet. Australasia will happen in the weekend of 22nd through 24th of November. And then Singapore's got one, an EAGX, on 14 through 15 December. This is all this year. It's crazy. There's so many ways to get plugged into this community. All right, so what do you think? As I say, this podcast is a truth-seeking one. It's a truth-seeking podcast. So if I made a mistake or you just disagree with my whole point and my thesis, I'm here to learn. If you're listening to this and you disagree or have something to add, please join the conversation on any of our social medias at Effecting Our Altruism, spelled with an E. Effecting, like effecting with an E. I'd love to hear you out. Keep the conversation rolling. And yeah, hit me up. So the next episode will be the last one in a series of 3 about effective giving from SK, from RC Forward. Stay tuned for that one. If this topic excites you, please stay subscribed to us on all of our social media platforms, including podcasts, so you don't miss notifications, ding, 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 about when the next one comes out. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for listening, and now go change the world.